Let me tell you something, man. In this world today, people believe when it's easy. People believe when everything's going their way, when the bills are paid, when the marriage is happy, when the car starts in the morning. But real faith is when you believe even when nothing makes sense. And that's what I see when I look at Muslims, faith that never wavers. You know, I've traveled the world. I've seen people from every walk of life. And I'll tell you this, there's something powerful, something almost unshakable about the way Muslims live their faith. 5 times a day, no matter where they are, no matter what's going on, they stop everything and turn to their Creator. I've seen it in airports, on sidewalks, in offices, in deserts. And every single time I think to myself, now that's what discipline looks like. See, most of us can't even keep a gym schedule, can't keep a diet, can't stay consistent with a goal. But Muslims have built their entire lives around something bigger than themselves. That's not religion. That's a relationship. That's love and commitment in its purest form. When the call to prayer sounds, that soft, beautiful adhan, it's like a reminder echoing through the world. Hey, it's time to remember who you belong to. That's why the world honors Muslims, because they remind us what it looks like to truly prioritize God. Not when it's convenient, not when it fits your schedule, but every single day, 5 times a day without fail. Let's be honest, this world is full of distractions. The noise never stops. Your phone's buzzing, your mind's racing, everybody's chasing something, money, fame, attention, validation. But then you look at a Muslim who, in the middle of all that chaos, pauses, washes up, lays down a prayer mat and bows before God. That's humility. That's peace. That's power. Now, let's talk about why that kind of faith shakes the world. Because, see, faith ain't just about words. Faith is about action. It's about commitment. It's about surrender. When a Muslim prays, they literally bow down, forehead to the ground. That's the universal symbol of humility. And man, if there's one thing this world needs more of, it's humility. We live in a time where people brag about everything. Folks take credit for every blessing like they made it happen by themselves. But a person who bows down 5 times a day says, God, I know it's you. I know I'm nothing without you. That right there. That's what gives a person strength that the world can't shake. Muslims believe in Tawheed, the oneness of God. That belief gives them clarity. They don't worship money, status, or fame. They know who their provider is. And when you know your source, you stop worrying about resources. That's why you see Muslims smiling even when life's hard, because their peace doesn't come from circumstance. It comes from connection. Let me break it down this way. A lot of us believe in God like we believe in Wi-Fi. We know He's there, but we only connect when the signal's strong. Muslims, though, they stay connected no matter what. Storms, struggles, success, none of that changes their prayer. That kind of consistency builds strength. It builds resilience. And it's not just individual faith, it's collective. When Muslims pray, they stand shoulder to shoulder, rich and poor, black and white, young and old, side by side. No VP section, no titles, no privilege. Everybody's equal in front of God. That image of millions of people united in prayer, it's one of the most humbling and beautiful things this world has ever seen. I'll tell you something else. Faith like that doesn't come easy. It's trained. It's practiced. It's tested. You see, Muslims don't just talk about faith, they live it through sacrifice. Take Ramadan, for example. For a whole month, they fast from sunrise to sunset. No food, no water, no gossip, no distractions. Why? To strengthen their soul, to train themselves to rise above their desires. Man, that's powerful, because in a world that tells you to indulge, Islam teaches you to discipline. In a culture that says, do whatever feels good, Islam's do whatever's right. That's a hard lesson to learn, but when you live it, it changes your whole life. Faith like that makes you calm under pressure. You lose a job and you say, God will provide. You face hate or hardship and you say, this too shall pass. You fall down and instead of giving up, you fall into prayer. That's the kind of faith the world honors, the kind that never quits, never complains, and never stops believing. Now, let's talk about something deep, how that faith impacts everything else. Because see, when your faith is strong, your family's stronger, your marriage is stronger, your decisions are wiser. You treat people better because you see God in everything. That's why the world honors Muslims. Because their faith doesn't just stay in the mosque, it shows up in their manners, their business, their compassion, their patience. When you live your life centered around God, you become a source of light in dark times. And that's what the Muslim community represents for many people around the world, light. Even through misunderstanding and media noise, that faith keeps shining. You can't dim it because it's not powered by approval. It's powered by conviction. Steve Harvey would say it like this, man, I respect anybody who lives what they preach. And Muslims, they do exactly that. Whether it's prayer, fasting, charity, or kindness, their daily actions speak louder than words. That's the faith the world honors. Not one that's loud, but one that's loyal. You see, when faith becomes your foundation, storms can come, but you won't crumble. And that's why Muslims inspire so many, because in every season, their devotion stays the same. That's not just religion, that's strength. So when we say the world honors Muslims, we're not talking about power, politics, or numbers. We're talking about something deeper: respect, Respect for a people who live by their principles even when the world moves the goalposts. Respect for those who choose peace in a time of chaos. Respect for hearts that bow before God and rise with purpose. Faith that never wavers is rare today. But when you see it, when you really see it, it moves you. It humbles you. It makes you want to believe a little stronger yourself. That's what the world feels when it looks at true Islam. That's why, no matter what you believe, you can't help but respect it. Because faith that's steadfast, that's not just spiritual, that's supernatural. And as Steve would close it, faith don't make life easy. It makes you stronger. And Muslims, man, they remind us every day that when you trust God with everything, you'll never lose anything that was meant for you. That's why the world honors them, because they show us what faith in motion really looks like. Let me tell you something real. In today's world, everybody's chasing attention. People will do anything for a click, a like, or a follow. You open your phone and it's a parade of folks showing off what they've got, what they wear, what they drive, and what they eat. The louder the world gets, the more people start thinking that to be seen, they got to reveal everything. But then you meet someone who walks in peace, who's covered not because they're hiding, but because they know their worth. And that's when you realize modesty is the loudest kind of confidence there is. That's what Steve Harvey would talk about. He'd say, see, the world tells you that to be valuable, you got to show it all. But Islam says to be valuable, you got to protect it. And man, that right there, that's deep. Because in a culture where everyone's trying to prove something, Muslims live a lesson that the world desperately needs to learn again. True beauty doesn't need to beg for attention. Let's be honest, we live in an age where the line between confidence and craving validation is getting real blurry. People want approval so bad they lose themselves trying to impress people who don't even care. But when you look at the teachings of Islam, modesty ain't about suppression. It's about self-respect. It's about knowing that your worth doesn't come from what others can see, comes from who you are. Steve would put it like this: modesty is power under control. That means you got the right to show off, you got the looks, you got the charm, but you choose not to. You choose dignity, you choose grace, you choose to let your character speak louder than your clothes, your heart louder than your selfies, and your values louder than your vanity. Now, when you see a Muslim woman wearing her hijab or dressing with modesty, a lot of people misunderstand it. They think it's a restriction. They think it's a rule meant to hide her. But let me tell you something. That's not hiding, that's honoring. That's protection, not oppression. The hijab says, my beauty is sacred, not public property. It says, I don't need your validation to know who I am. And that right there, that's the kind of strength you can't buy. Steve would say, a woman who knows her worth don't have to show everything. She shows up. She carries herself with elegance, confidence, and peace. Her beauty shines through her presence, her faith, her kindness. That's what the world honors about Muslim women. They carry a quiet confidence that speaks volumes. And it's not just about women. Modesty in Islam applies to men too. The way they dress, the way they speak, the way they look at women. It's about self-control, about respecting others and yourself. Because let's be real, modesty ain't just about fabric, it's about focus. It's about choosing to rise above temptation and ego. Steve would remind us, you can't build respect if you don't respect yourself first. And that's what modesty teaches. It sets a standard that your value is not up for negotiation. In a world where everybody's selling themselves short, Muslims remind us that real power is in privacy. You don't have to show everything you got to prove your worth. When you know your value, you don't discount yourself for attention. Let me take it a little deeper. Modesty builds peace. When a person dresses and acts modestly, they create an environment of respect. People start seeing each other for their words, their wisdom, their heart, not just their appearance. That's the kind of world we're all craving right now. But somewhere along the way, we traded depth for display. We started believing that to be noticed, we had to be loud. That's why the world honors Muslims, because they've held on to a principle the world forgot. They've kept alive a way of life that says, I am enough as I am. Their faith teaches them that dignity doesn't come from designer brands, it comes from divine purpose. Now, I know somebody might say, but Steve, we live in a modern world. Times have changed. Yeah, times have changed, but truth hasn't. Respect is still respect. Purity is still power. Dignity is still divine. Some values ain't meant to evolve with trends. They're meant to anchor us when the world starts drifting. Modesty isn't about being less. It's about being more intentional. It's about saying, I don't need to reveal everything to be seen. I'll let my spirit do the shining. And when you carry yourself like that, you walk differently, you talk differently. You attract differently. Because people start respecting you not for your appearance, but for your aura. Steve would share how modesty brings peace into relationships too. When a man respects a woman for who she is, not what she shows, that love becomes purer. When a woman values a man for his character, not his cash or car, that bond becomes real. Islam's teaching on modesty builds that foundation. Respect before romance, honor before attraction, value before validation. And let's not forget, modesty also teaches humility. Because when you stop trying to impress people, you start focusing on impressing God. You start realizing that everything you are is a gift, not a performance. You stop chasing likes and start chasing purpose. That's when life starts to make sense. The world honors Muslims because their modesty reminds us that confidence doesn't have to scream. It can whisper and still be powerful. The hijab, the long sleeves, the respectful tone. These aren't signs of limitation, they're signs of liberation. Liberation from insecurity, comparison, and the pressure to be perfect for the world's approval. Steve would say, see, when you know your value, you don't compete, you complete. You're not out here trying to outshine anybody. You're just shining in your own lane with grace and gratitude. That's what modesty looks like. It's not about hiding your light. It's about protecting it from people who don't deserve to dim it. There's something peaceful about seeing someone who doesn't need the world's applause to feel valuable. That quiet strength, that's beauty. And that's what Islam teaches through modesty. It's not just about how you dress, it's about how you think, how you treat others, how you carry yourself when nobody's watching. So when Steve Harvey says the world honors Muslims, it's because the world can see something different in them. A kind of grace that money can't buy and fame can't fake. A grace that comes from knowing who you are and whose you are. He'd probably end it like this. Look, man, modesty ain't outdated. It's timeless. Because class never goes out of style. When you respect yourself, you teach the world how to treat you. And Muslims, through their modesty, remind us all that the greatest form of beauty is not what's revealed, it's what's reserved, and that's the truth. The world honors Muslims not just for their faith, but for the way they live it with grace, dignity, and respect. Because when you live with modesty, you walk in peace. And when you walk in peace, you inspire the world to do the same. Now listen, if there's one thing this world needs more of, it's unity. Everywhere you look, people are divided. We're divided by color, by money, by language, by status, by borders, by pride. Everybody's talking about me, mine, my people. But when you look at Islam, you see something beautiful, something the world is starving for. Brother, real, genuine, heart, deep brotherhood. And that's one of the reasons the world honors Muslims, because they live by a principle that says we are one. Steve Harvey would say it plain, man, I've been around a lot of folks in my life, but I've never seen unity like the unity I see among Muslims. It doesn't matter where they're from, Africa, Asia, America, Europe. When they stand to pray, they all face one direction, one God, one purpose. That right there is powerful. It's not about race. It's not about class. It's not about fame. It's about faith. And that's something the world has lost sight of. We've gotten so busy comparing ourselves that we forgot we were created equal. But when you look at Islam, you're reminded that true equality isn't just a slogan, it's a lifestyle. You walk into a mosque anywhere in the world, and you'll see something amazing, a billionaire and a janitor standing shoulder to shoulder, both bowing before God. No VIP section, no front row for the rich. Just humanity, equal, humble, united. That's the kind of unity that changes hearts, and Steve would tell you. You can't fake that. That's real. Because it's easy to say, we're all brothers, but Islam lives it. Every prayer, every act of charity, every greeting begins with peace. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. Can you imagine if the whole world started every conversation that way? With peace instead of pride, we wouldn't have half the conflicts we got right now. Now, let's talk about what makes that brotherhood so special. See, it's built on compassion. Muslims are taught that you can't truly have faith if you sleep full while your neighbor is hungry. You can't claim love for God if you mistreat his creation. And you can't call yourself righteous if your brother or sister is suffering and you turn away. Steve Harvey would love that teaching because it's simple and it's real. Love people like you want to be loved. Help people like you want to be helped. That's the essence of brotherhood. It's not about what religion you follow or what skin you wear. It's about the heart you bring. If Islam makes that clear, every human life has value. Every act of kindness counts, and you see it especially during times like Ramadan. Man, the way Muslims come together, breaking fast together, feeding the poor, giving charity, it's one of the most beautiful displays of unity on earth. In those moments, nobody's thinking about status or success. They're thinking about serving each other. That's compassion in action. Steve would probably share it like this. You know what makes a strong community? It ain't money. It ain't fame. It's compassion. It's when you got people who look out for each other like family. That's what Islam built. That sense of ummah, that's the Arabic word for community, is what makes Muslims stand out. They don't just pray together, they live together. When someone's hurting, they rally. When someone's struggling, they support. When there's a crisis in one corner of the world, Muslims from the other side of the globe send aid, money, prayers, whatever they can. That's not politics, that's heart. And see, that's what the world honors. Unity through love, not control. Compassion that doesn't wait for recognition. Muslims don't help others because it looks good on camera. They help because their Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught them that the best of you are those who are most beneficial to others. That teaching is universal. It's something we all need. Now, let's be honest. The world today is more connected than ever, but people are more lonely than ever, too. Everybody's scrolling, but nobody's talking. Everybody's watching, but nobody's seeing. But in Islam, connection is sacred. When Muslims pray, they stand shoulder to shoulder. And if there's a gap between them, the person next to them fills it. You know what that symbolizes? That we rise stronger when we stand together. Steve would smile and say, man, if we could just learn to close the gaps between us like that, this world would heal. Because that's what brotherhood does. It heals. It reminds you that you're not alone, that somebody's got your back. It brings comfort in chaos. Another thing Islam teaches that Steve would highlight is forgiveness. True brotherhood can't exist without mercy. Muslims are taught that if someone wrongs you, you don't hold grudges. You forgive, you pray for them, you move forward. That's hard, but it's powerful. Because forgiveness frees you from hate, and unity grows in the soil of forgiveness. Steve Harvey would put it like this: you can't build unity if you're still building walls in your heart. And Islam tears those walls down by reminding you that everyone's a creation of the same God. That means no matter where someone's from, what they look like, or what they've done, they still deserve kindness. And man, that's what the world honors about Muslims. Despite being misunderstood, they keep leading with peace. Despite being judged, they keep offering help. Despite being divided by borders, they keep united by belief. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Let's not forget, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, built a society where brotherhood was the foundation. He united tribes that hated each other for centuries. He brought together people from different races, languages, and backgrounds and made them one community. And that same unity still echoes today. When you see millions of Muslims standing together in Mecca, all wearing white, all moving in harmony, it's like watching humanity at its best. No titles, no egos, just oneness. Steve Harvey would probably pause and say, that right there, that's how God meant for us to live. Together, equal, in peace. And here's the truth. Unity doesn't mean we're all the same. It means we respect each other's differences and still choose compassion. That's what Islam teaches, and that's what the world honors. Because division is easy. It takes courage to build bridges. When people see Muslims standing side by side, giving, forgiving, praying, and working for good, they see a model of what humanity could be. And that's why deep down, even people who don't understand Islam still respect its unity. Because unity is a language everybody feels. So Steve Harvey would close it with this kind of energy. You want to know why the world honors Muslims? Because in a world full of hate, they still preach peace. In a time full of division, they still practice brotherhood. And in a life full of self-interest, they still care for others. That's love. That's leadership. And that's what humanity was meant to look like. And then he'd say, see, brotherhood ain't just about blood, it's about belief. And when you got that kind of love running through your faith, you don't just honor each other, you honor God. That's why, no matter what corner of the earth you're in, when you see Muslims united in prayer, helping the needy, or standing up for peace, you can't help but feel it. That's not just religion. That's a reminder of what we were created for: compassion, connection, and community. And that right there is why the world honors Muslims. Because they show us that unity isn't just possible, it's powerful. Let me tell you something, man. Talent will get you started, but discipline will keep you going. Everybody wants success, peace, happiness, and blessings, but very few are willing to build the habits that bring them. That's where discipline comes in. And when you look at Muslims, you see that discipline and self-control built right into their lives. That's why the world honors them. Because they don't just believe in God, they live for Him every single day through the power of discipline. Steve Harvey would lean forward and say, I know greatness when I see it, and greatness always has one thing in common: structure. And that's what Islam teaches. It's a life built on order, focus, and consistency. Muslims don't just pray when they feel like it, they pray because it's time. They don't just fast when it's easy, they fast when it's hard. They don't just give when they have extra, they give because it's their duty. That's discipline. And discipline is what separates those who wish from those who win. Now think about this. 5 times a day, Muslims stop whatever they're doing to pray. Business, school, work, travel, doesn't matter. When that call to prayer echoes, they pause life itself to turn to the one who gave them life. That's not convenience. That's commitment. That's training your soul to say, my time belongs to God first. And you know what's powerful about that? It keeps you grounded. In a world where everyone's chasing something, prayer brings you back home, back to peace, back to gratitude, back to purpose. That's what discipline does. It protects you from chaos. Steve would say it plain. You can't have peace if you don't have control. And that's exactly what Islam teaches. Through prayer, fasting, charity, and moral values, Muslims learn to master their impulses. They learn to say no to what weakens them and yes to what strengthens them. And man, that's rare today because self-control is the highest form. Let's talk about Ramadan, one of the most powerful examples of discipline in the world. For 30 days, Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset. No food, no water, no gossip, no anger. Just patience, reflection, and prayer. Now you might think that's hard, and it is, but it's also life-changing. Because fasting isn't just about hunger, it's about humility. It's about learning how to control your desires instead of letting them control you. Steve Harvey would tell it like this: you can't lead your life if you can't lead yourself. And that's exactly what fasting teaches. It builds your inner muscle. That strength that says, I can handle it. Because once you can control something as basic as food, you start realizing you can control your words, your reactions, your emotions, and your habits too. That's what makes Muslims strong, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. They know how to endure, how to stay calm, how to hold back when the world says, give in. They've trained their souls to lead, not follow their impulses. That's what real power looks like. Now, think about the kind of discipline it takes to wake up before sunrise every single day for Fajr, the morning prayer. The world's quiet, everybody's asleep, and a Muslim is up, washing, praying, thanking God for another chance to live. That's not easy. That's spiritual strength. That's training yourself to prioritize what truly matters. And Steve would say, see, discipline ain't glamorous. It's the stuff people don't see. It's what you do when nobody's clapping for you. That's what Muslims do daily. They practice faith privately with consistency and heart. And when you live that kind of life, discipline turns into peace. You know what else discipline does? It builds respect. When people see how Muslims live, the way they pray, fast, give, control themselves, they respect that. Because in a world full of instant gratification, consistency is rare. The world honors people who can stay faithful to their values even when it's inconvenient. Islam doesn't just train the body, it trains the soul. It teaches that every temptation you resist is a victory, and every moment of patience is a form of worship. When you hold your tongue instead of arguing, when you forgive instead of retaliating, when you give instead of hoarding, that's self-control, that's discipline in motion. Steve would probably smile and say, let me tell you something. You can't be close to God without discipline, because blessings don't flow into chaos. And that's truth. Islam gives life structure. It reminds you that every moment matters, every action counts, every word has weight. Let's go even deeper. Discipline in Islam doesn't just build individuals, it builds communities. When millions of Muslims pray together, fast together, break fast together, it creates unity and rhythm. Everyone's striving for the same goal, to please God. That's what discipline does. It synchronizes hearts. It makes people move as one. And this isn't just about spiritual discipline. It spills over into everything else. A person who's consistent in prayer is consistent in work. A person who can control their desires can control their finances, emotions, and relationships. That's why so many Muslims are known for their calmness, their patience, their focus. It's not accidental. It's trained through faith. Now, Steve would love this point. Islam doesn't say life's easy. It says life's a test. But it gives you tools to pass that test, discipline, and patience. When life hits you when you're facing rejection, heartbreak, or loss, discipline keeps you standing. It keeps you from falling apart because you know how to trust the process and wait on God. That's the kind of strength that inspires people. Because in a world that tells you to react fast, Islam teaches you to respond with wisdom. In a time where everybody's trying to go viral, Islam says, go inward. Control yourself before you try to control your circumstances. That's why the world honors Muslims, not because they're perfect, but because they practice what most people can't restrain. And restraint is the foundation of greatness. You can see it in their daily lives, from the way they start meals by saying Bismillah in the name of God, to how they stop and pray before making big decisions. That kind of mindfulness builds character. And when you build character, you build peace. Steve would wrap it up with a powerful truth. Discipline ain't punishment, it's protection. It protects your purpose, your peace, and your power. And that's what Islam has done for millions. It's given them a system that turns faith into action and action into peace. So when the world honors Muslim, it's not just about their faith, it's about their focus. It's about how they've turned devotion into direction, how they built lives that revolve around what matters most. In a world of distractions, they've chosen dedication. And Steve would finish it with that signature power in his voice. You want to know what real strength looks like. It ain't muscles or money, it's discipline. It's when you can walk away from temptation, hold your peace in anger, and trust God even when it hurts. That's strength, that's power, that's Islam. Because when you master yourself, life can't master you. And that's why the world honors Muslims, because they've mastered the art of control in a world that's lost it. Now, let me tell you something real. Faith ain't just about religion. Faith is power. It's that invisible force that keeps you moving when everything in life tells you to stop. It's the light that shows up when your whole world goes dark. And when Steve Harvey talks about Muslims, he always highlights something that many people overlook. Their faith isn't passive. It's active. It's not just something they say. It's something they live. You see, Islam teaches that faith isn't only about believing in God. It's about reflecting that belief in everything you do. When a Muslim smiles at a stranger, that's faith. When they feed the hungry, that's faith. When they forgive someone who wrongs them, that's faith. It's a faith that spills over into humanity, that transforms hearts, families, and whole communities. Steve Harvey would say it like this: you can't claim to love God and not love his people. And that's the essence of Islam. It's about serving, giving, and uplifting. A Muslim's faith isn't locked inside a prayer rug. It walks with them into the world. It shows up in their kindness, in their honesty, and in the peace they bring into every space they enter. Islam's foundation, immense faith, is built on hope. Hope that no matter how broken you feel, God can heal you. Hope that no matter how lost you are, God can guide you. Hope that no matter how heavy your mistakes are, God's mercy is heavier. That's a message the whole world needs right now. Steve often tells people, your setback ain't the end, it's a setup for your comeback. And that's exactly how faith works in Islam. When life knocks you down, faith says, get up. God's not done with you yet. When you lose, faith says, it's not failure, it's redirection. That's what gives Muslims their peace, this unshakable trust that no matter what happens, it's all part of a divine plan. Now let's talk about what that kind of faith produces. Humanity. When your heart is anchored in God, it changes how you treat people. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, the best of you are those who are best to others. And that's the heart of Islam. It's about being a light in someone else's darkness. Steve would put it plain. You don't need to be rich to bless people. You just need a good heart. And Islam echoes that. Zakat. Giving charities, that is one of its pillars. Muslims are commanded to give from what they love, not what's. That's faith in action. That's hope turning into help. Every Ramadan, you'll see Muslims around the world feeding family, helping the poor, forgiving debts, and spreading love. And Steve, being a man of faith himself, would say, now that's how faith's supposed to look. Not just talking about blessings, but being one. Because true faith makes you care, not only for yourself, but for every soul God created. There's something powerful about a faith that teaches you to love your neighbor even when they're different, to pray for those who hurt you, to seek peace instead of revenge. That's not weakness. That's spiritual maturity. That's what Islam instills. And that's why the world honors Muslims, because their faith inspires hope in a world that's running low on it. Now, let's get real for a minute. Life gets hard for everybody, Muslims included. But what's beautiful is how their faith keeps them steady. When tragedy strikes, you'll hear a Muslim say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, we belong to God, and to him we return. That's not just a phrase, that's perspective. It's saying, God, even in pain, I trust you. Steve would say, that's the kind of peace money can't buy. Because when you've got that level of faith, fear loses its grip. You stop panicking over things you can't control and start finding peace and surrender. That's what Islam gives, a peaceful heart in a painful world. And that peace doesn't just stay inside one person, it spreads. People see a Muslim facing challenges with calmness and grace. It makes them curious. How are you so strong? And the answer is always the same, faith. Faith that God is enough. Faith that better days are coming. Faith that every storm ends with a rainbow. Steve Harvey often talks about how faith has carried him through poverty, rejection, and loss. He says, when you trust God's plan, you stop fighting the process. And that's a message Islam embodies completely. Muslims believe that everything, every success, every failure, every delay happens by God's will. That belief brings deep contentment. Because when you know God's in control, you don't have to be. That's the kind of faith that inspires humanity. Because when people live with peace and gratitude, they create peace and gratitude around them. When you stop complaining and start trusting, you become someone else's reason to hope. Think about it when a Muslim gives charity quietly, forgives sincerely, or helps humbly, it sends a message. Goodness still exists. That's powerful, because faith, when lived right, becomes contagious. It makes people believe in kindness again. Steve would say, faith ain't about talking big, it's about walking tall. And Islam teaches that beautifully. Every act, from a simple smile to a heartfelt prayer, becomes an act of worship. Faith turns ordinary moments into opportunities to connect with God. But here's the real beauty. Faith in Islam isn't built on fear. It's built on love and mercy. Muslims don't see God as someone waiting to punish them, but as someone constantly forgiving them. Every prayer, every tear, every alhamdulillah, a thank God is a reminder that no matter how imperfect we are, God's mercy is greater. And that's a hope the world desperately needs. Because we live in a time where people feel alone, unloved, and hopeless. But when they see Muslims living with peace, patience, and compassion, even under pressure, it restores something deep in the human spirit. It reminds everyone that faith still works. Steve Harvey would wrap it up by saying, you can't inspire people with fear. You inspire them with faith. And that's exactly what Islam does. It inspires people to rise higher, to treat others better, to believe harder. It gives people a reason to keep going when life gets tough. When you see a Muslim bowing down in prayer, it's not weakness, it's power. It's saying, I'm surrendering to the one who never fails me. When you see them smiling through pain, it's not denial, it's trust. When you see them giving when they have little, it's not foolishness, it's faith. That kind of faith doesn't just build individuals, it builds nations. It builds a world rooted in mercy, compassion, and justice. It's the kind of faith that inspires not just Muslims, but anyone watching, because it reminds us that there's still goodness left in the world, and that God is still in control. Steve would end with that deep, heartfelt tone of his. You want to know what real power looks like? It's faith. Faith that says, even when I can't see it, I believe it. Faith that turns pain into purpose, waiting into worship, and struggle into strength. That's the kind of faith Islam teaches. And that's why the world honors it, because faith like that don't just move mountains, it moves hearts. Because at the end of the day, the world doesn't need more fear, it needs more faith. And when faith walks hand in hand with humanity, hope is reborn. That's the beauty of Islam. That's the message Steve Harvey celebrates. And that's the light the world needs now more than ever.